President Donald J. Trump on Wednesday issued a blunt ultimatum to Iran, declaring that Tehran has 10 to 15 days to reach a sweeping new agreement over its nuclear program or face potentially devastating military consequences, a warning that has propelled the United States and Iran to the edge of open conflict. The announcement, delivered from the White House amid intensifying diplomatic efforts and a sweeping American military buildup, marks the most serious confrontation between Washington and Tehran in years. Administration officials described the moment as a final attempt to force a diplomatic breakthrough. Critics, however, warn it could become the prelude to another protracted war in the Middle East. "This is their last chance," Mr. Trump said, according to officials present at the meeting. "If they don't make a deal, there will be very bad things." Behind the rhetoric lies a formidable show of force. Over the past 2 weeks, the Pentagon has repositioned a broad array of assets across the Middle East. 2 aircraft carrier strike groups have been deployed to the region, accompanied by guided missile destroyers, submarines, and support vessels. Additional squadrons of fighter jets and long-range bombers have been moved to strategic air bases. Missile defense systems have been reinforced to protect U.S. forces and regional allies. Defense officials, speaking on background, described the deployment as one of the most significant American military concentrations in the region since the early 2000s. The forces now in place, they say, could execute a range of options, from limited precision strikes on nuclear facilities to a broader campaign targeting Iran's missile infrastructure and Revolutionary Guard positions. While no final order has been given, commanders have reportedly been instructed to prepare operational plans that could be executed on short notice. At the heart of the crisis lies Iran's expanding nuclear program. U.S. intelligence assessments shared with Congress in recent days suggest that Iran has accelerated enrichment of uranium to levels approaching weapons-grade purity. Administration officials argue that Tehran is shortening the breakout time required to assemble a nuclear weapon, a threshold they say cannot be tolerated. Iranian leaders vehemently deny seeking nuclear arms. They maintain that their program remains within peaceful civilian parameters and accuse Washington of exaggerating the threat to justify pressure tactics. Tehran has also pointed to years of economic sanctions and what it calls American noncompliance with previous agreements. The collapse of earlier nuclear frameworks has left deep mistrust on both sides. Diplomats familiar with the ongoing talks say negotiations have stalled over key sticking points: limits on enrichment levels, international inspection regimes, sanctions relief, and Iran's ballistic missile program. Indirect discussions facilitated by intermediaries in Europe and the Gulf have continued quietly, but officials concede that progress has been minimal. In response to Mr. Trump's deadline, Iranian officials have issued stark warnings of their own. In a letter submitted to the United Nations, Iran declared that any military action would be met with decisive and proportionate retaliation. Tehran's leadership emphasized that U.S. bases in the region, as well as allied military installations, would be considered legitimate targets in the event of hostilities. Iran possesses an arsenal of ballistic and cruise missiles capable of striking across the Gulf, and it maintains a network of allied militias that could target American interests. This week, Iran conducted naval drills in the Gulf of Oman, showcasing missile launches and coordinated maritime maneuvers. Analysts interpret the exercises as a signal that Tehran is preparing for the possibility of confrontation while attempting to deter an American strike. The escalating standoff has reverberated across global markets and diplomatic circles. Oil prices climbed sharply following Mr. Trump's ultimatum, driven by fears that conflict could disrupt shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway through which a significant portion of the world's energy supply passes. European governments have urged restraint and called for intensified diplomacy, while several nations have issued travel advisories for citizens in Iran and neighboring countries. Privately, some allied governments have expressed concern about being drawn into a broader conflict. Although long-standing security partnerships bind the United States to several Middle Eastern allies, officials in Europe and Asia have signaled unease about supporting offensive operations without a clear international mandate. Within the United States, Mr. Trump's posture toward Iran has sparked fierce debate in Congress. Supporters argue that credible military pressure is the only way to prevent Iran from crossing the nuclear threshold and destabilizing the region. Opponents counter that any significant military strike would require congressional authorization under the Constitution's war powers provisions. Some lawmakers have introduced measures aimed at limiting unilateral executive action. Public opinion appears divided. Recent surveys show Americans wary of another Middle East conflict, but also concerned about nuclear proliferation and regional security risks. The administration insists that its strategy is designed to avoid war by demonstrating resolve, yet critics warn that ultimatums combined with military deployments can narrow diplomatic options. Military analysts caution that even a carefully calibrated strike could spiral beyond initial intentions. Iran's retaliatory capabilities, including missile attacks, cyber operations, and proxy engagements, could trigger a rapid cycle of escalation. A limited strike on nuclear infrastructure might prompt missile salvos against U.S. bases, leading to expanded American operations targeting additional military assets. Regional allies could become involved, widening the conflict and increasing humanitarian consequences. Despite mounting pressure, both Washington and Tehran have left the door open to negotiation. Administration officials insist that the president's deadline is intended to accelerate diplomacy rather than replace it. Iranian officials have signaled willingness to continue indirect talks, but reject what they describe as coercive ultimatums. With the clock ticking on the president's 10 to 15-day window, diplomats are scrambling to revive discussions. Whether those efforts yield compromise or collapse under mutual distrust remains uncertain. For now, aircraft carriers patrol strategic waters, diplomats shuttle between capitals, and military planners refine contingencies. The world watches as two longtime adversaries edge closer to a moment that could determine whether the coming weeks bring a diplomatic breakthrough or the outbreak of another Middle East war. Join the conversation, like, share, subscribe for more insight news. Drop your thoughts below.